It is God's will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and joining in the energy and the love. And last week I talked about the power to heal, and I'm still in a way talking about that as well. However, one of the things that came to me is that as I was thinking about it for this week is that I was hearing some things, and it occurred to me that there's an important awareness that we have in terms of our ability and our power to heal. And as I was reflecting on this, it occurred to me that one of the most significant things for us to begin to really get and understand, and maybe I think many already do, is that the most powerful thing that we can participate in terms of healing, has to do with what's coming out of here. Now, don't get me wrong, what's coming out of here is coming from what's going on up here, and what's going on up here ultimately needs to be what's coming from here. You follow what I'm saying? And so I was thinking about the power of our words and the words that we use and how significant our words are. I came across a story. This is actually actual statements that were found on insurance forms, where drivers attempted to summarize the details of an accident in the fewest words possible. Coming home, I drove into the wrong house and collided with a tree I don't have. I thought my window was down, but I found out it was up when I put my head through it. And in my attempt to kill a fly, I drove to a telephone pole. Well, words can be really very powerful, but they can also be very diffuse, as you can see. And they can be very confusing. And it really can, in many ways, trip us up in our experiences in life. But there's an amazing power in words, and sometimes we don't give that enough credit in our lives. We don't give enough credit to the importance and the significance of the words that we use. Johnny Carson once joked in his monologue about a shortage of toilet paper. And he caused a nationwide run on toilet paper, creating an actual shortage of toilet paper. True. Came from the book of Essential Useless Information, in case you need that. So, one of the things I think it's really important for us to recognize, this has been a teaching that has been in almost every spiritual teaching. Almost everyone that I'm aware of teaches the importance and the significance of our words. And those words have the power to lift up, and they have the power to tear down. And I really was thinking about that and reflecting on this. Sometimes we think, I remember when I was growing up, my mom taught me this little thing, and it really helped me a lot. And what it was, I remember you probably had something like this, and someone was saying some things that I didn't like, and they were calling me names and things like that. And so I was upset and crying about it, and she taught me this little thing. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never harm me. Well, I believe that that is true to the extent that we don't buy into or accept the words. However, one of the things that we need to be conscious of and aware of is that when we're putting words out, they do have a power. And they have a power to create. See, you and I are created in the image and after the likeness of the divine. We are created as spiritual beings. And as a part of the creative process, we are creative beings in and of ourselves. And we are actually creating all the time. You've heard me say this. We are creative beings. And we're actually creating even right now, even though you may not be opening your mouth, you're holding thoughts. But it's important to recognize that the words that we use are doing a couple of different things. One of the things that our words do is that they are actually focusing our thoughts. In addition to that, they are actually programming our unconscious thoughts. And so when we actually put out words, we're actually putting out something that is focusing the thoughts that we're holding in an energy and a vibration that actually can draw to you that energy of those words. And at the same time, we're giving a message to our unconscious mind to accept these words. And so we create this vicious cycle sometimes. And it's important to recognize that these words have the power to lift us and to even heal. To heal our physical bodies, to heal relationships, to heal, I believe, our country and our world. And at the same time, it has the ability to tear it down, to diminish, to bring it into a lower energy. And so, it's so valuable for us to really tune into that understanding. I came across, and you guys are probably familiar with this, really kind of a mystery, I think, in terms of Scripture. And this is from Matthew. It says, "The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry, and seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. And when he reached out, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. And then he said to the tree, 'May no one ever eat fruit from you again.' And his disciples heard him say it." And then a little later it says, "When evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out to the city. And in the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Peter remembered and said to Jesus, 'Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered.' And Jesus said, 'Have faith in God.' Jesus answered, 'I tell you truly, if anyone says to the mountain, "Go throw yourself into the sea," and does not doubt in their heart, but believes what they say will happen, it will be done for them. And therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Now this is a very powerful, powerful teaching. And it has to do with a couple of things. It has to do with our belief, our faith. It has to do with our focus, but it has to do specifically with what we're saying. And so if we put words out there, and if we on some level believe those words, we are attracting to us those experiences. We are helping to manifest them. We're helping to bring them into our world. And so, in The Magic of the Word, May Rowland said that the living word is like a word of command. It speaks through mankind when she has become aware of the Christ within. So there's a power that is actually in each of our words. And so one of the things that really occurs to me is that I know at times I've been rather careless with my words. Anybody else know what I'm talking about? I've been careless with my words. And I do know that on many ways I have experienced the results of that and the consequences of that. And so one of the things that I'm really meditating on is to really recognize the power of my words, the power of the word. One of the things that Stella Terrell Mann, who was a wonderful New Thought writer, said how to use the power of in her book, How to Use the Power of Your Word. The power of the word has no sense of humor and does not recognize incongruous situations any more than does the power of electricity or gravity. And so what I hear in this myself is that, even though we may be making jest about something, if there's a part of us that really has an energy behind that, we're still in the process of creating what that is. And so even though we may one of the things that I see is that sometimes we are sarcastic about things. I like sarcasm. Sometimes I think it's pretty funny. But I realize that if I really have a belief behind some of that I'm actually creating some things that I don't necessarily want to draw into my life and into my experiences. But I do like humor. And I think you can have humor and say things that are funny, but not necessarily be buying into the beliefs of them. I came across this story as a young Father O'Reilly, a newly ordained priest, and was to hear his first confessions, and he was kind of anxious to get off of on the right foot, and he asked the experienced Father McMartin for some advice. And so the two sat in the rectory, and Father McMartin began, and first of all, McMartin's caution, weigh your words with care. For example, priests should always respond to penitents with words like, I understand, rather than, oh, wow. Our words actually can have power, but they can also bring power of levity and lightness. I think it's important for us to really look at how are we using them? How am I using my words in my life? In the book Consent by Newton Dillaway, he says, words are of supreme importance in that they make impressions on the conscious mind and on the subconscious mind. And these impressions often shape the quality of our thinking and our action. This is the primary reason why in Unity we teach the importance and the power of both affirmations and denials. Thinking about the story of Jesus cursing the fig tree, what we're really seeing here, and a fig tree represents actually abundance and plenty. It's a representation of the tree of life, for that matter. It represents life. And if you think about it in terms of the Middle East, the fig is actually very valued and very appreciated in that culture. And it is a wonderful thing. So when he comes to the tree and thinks he's going to experience the fruits of that tree and discovers that it has no fruits, he says, no one will eat fruit from you again. So I took some time to really reflect and meditate on this, and what it really occurs to me is that in the Scripture we really understand that all of these things represent some aspect of our energy, of our consciousness. They represent our soul on some level, or for that matter, they represent manifestations of that which could be in our body. And so what we're seeing here is the fig tree actually is representing an energy, a thought, a belief system that really has no fruit in it, or has fruit that doesn't have the fruit that really can sustain us or that feeds us or blesses us in some way. And so him using his words are basically a denial, saying no one is going to accept this idea, and that's what that really represents. It represents an idea. Now, we all have ideas that we absolutely think are the truth, don't we? We have ideas about ourselves that we think are the truth, but they're not necessarily in alignment with the truth with a capital T. We have thoughts and ideas about others that we think are the truth, and we believe that our thoughts about others are the truth, don't we? But the thoughts that we have about others are simply our thoughts. And they may or may not reflect the truth. And so what I'm hearing in this is we want to really meditate on the words that we use in our life. We want to really pay attention to the words, not only that we say about ourselves, but the words that we are thinking about ourselves, and oftentimes the ones that really we don't really pay that much attention to. It's called the inner talk. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? We all have this little inner dialogue that goes on, it seems. And we're dialoguing with the world, we're dialoguing with our bodies, we're dialoguing. We get up in the morning, we look in the mirror, and the first thought is to look at your wrinkles, and you kind of go, oh my gosh, That's all a dialogue that you're having. And if you use words to express things like that you don't necessarily want to experience more of, then you're actually feeding more of that energy. And so what we're really looking at here is shifting not only our words, but shifting our thoughts. I came across, and words actually have real power, and one of the things, the quotes I gave is that it's like when you state a word, it's like you're making a command. And the universe actually really responds to commands. Do you realize that? The universe does respond to commands. We can actually hold an awareness and make a declaration and make a command, and the universe has they're serious. They're serious about this. We're okay. So it's amazing how we can say something, and it'll have a great power, and we'll see things show up that we had not even didn't realize sometimes. Commands are pretty powerful words. We have a way of using our words that are commands whether we realize it or not sometimes. I came across there was a newspaper photographer out in Los Angeles, and he was called in by his editor and told to go and cover a raging fire out in the Palo Verdes area actually, and it's a real hilly area, and his assignment was to rush down to the airport and get on an airplane that was waiting for him and go and take some pictures of this fire. So he runs down to the airport and he sees this airplane that was propped up, and the engine was running, and the guys in there looked like ready to take off. So he goes and jumps in the plane and says, let's go, I'm ready, let's go. The guy takes off and he's flying around and says, okay, now go, when you get over to the fire, make a big circle. And he's digging in, getting his camera and stuff, and he's saying, now see if you can get a little bit closer to the fire over there. And the guy there was a silence for a minute, and the guy flying the plane kind of looked over and said, you are the instructor, right? Well, our words, we can make commands, and sometimes they get us in trouble because we really don't know what's going on, and we make decisions and we make commands of circumstances and situations in life that we don't really understand, and so sometimes we put ourselves in challenges and situations. I looked up in the Daily Word, I was looking at different things, and I was thinking about the idea of healing and the idea of health and the importance of our words in that. And so one of the things I want us to really listen to and pay attention to is the conversations we have about our health, conversations we have about our physical bodies. We have been trained and conditioned, I think, in many ways to all be organ donors. I think we've also been trained to be organ players. And we do what I call our organ recitals. You know the organ recitals? Where we go and talk about all the organs that are not working. We have a tendency to share those kinds of thoughts with each other. And part of what we're doing is trying to really connect with others in some way. And I understand that. I understand that need and that desire to connect on some level. But we really want to connect on a level of wholeness, on a level of healing, on a level of health. Now, if you need to discuss what's going on in your physical body with someone who's there to help you with that, I think that's very appropriate. But we have a tendency to really share whatever is going on with whoever wants to listen at that time. And, we oftentimes will get, oh, I'm sorry, And I don't have a problem with people having sympathy. I think it's important to have sympathy. But I think we're actually giving more energy to the situation when we do that. I think we're actually feeding it. So I think it's really important for us to really be conscious and aware of when we're sharing things about our physical being, that we're sharing it with those who are going to hold us in the best light, that are holding us in a sense of wholeness, and they're there to help us to see and to move into those energies and that experience. in the revealing word, it says, health and the word, experiences, innumerable times repeated, prove the power of words to bring health. Health is potential in the real of your being. Health can always be demonstrated through the power of the spoken word. And he goes, another one, I talked about universal resources, and it said, the omnipresent cosmic substance and reality from which all supply flows to man by means of his spoken word. These are from Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity. So one of the things that I want to remind everyone that last week I talked about Myrtle Fillmore and her healing experience. And she went to a lecture by the man E.B. Weeks, a metaphysical teacher. And what she heard in that lecture was, she had tuberculosis. And at that time, tuberculosis was a death sentence because that's what they believed. And that's what they told everyone. And they told her that she needed to basically get her life and affairs in order, that she wasn't going to live very long. But she heard this lecture by E.B. Weeks. And in that lecture, he said, you are a child of God. Therefore, you do not inherit sickness. You do not inherit sickness. And I'm going to suggest to you that's true of each and every one of you. It's not something that's inherited. It is something that we have accepted. It's an agreement that has been agreed to. And so you are a child of God, therefore you do not inherit sickness. And she said that in that moment, she was healed. But what I also know is that in that moment she was healed, but it took about 2 years for that healing to fully manifest. And as a part of that manifestation, she spent hours every day sitting and meditating and talking to the cells of her body. She spoke to the cells of her body and asked them to forgive her for any wrong thoughts or judgments she had about the cells of her body. She thanked them for the work that they did. And she praised them back into health. And over a period of time, she was completely cleared of all tuberculosis. So it's a process, but a part of that process is the power of our words. And speaking those words in such a way that we hold the energy of the truth behind them. Now, I want to clarify something. We do affirmations, and I think affirmations are so important and so powerful. But I'm going to suggest to you that just saying the words doesn't necessarily make them true. When you do an affirmation, it's not because you're making something true. You do an affirmation that is true, and you bring that truth into your energy and your consciousness. And in the very act of doing that, you actually align yourself with the awareness and the belief system of that truth, and therefore you're beginning to manifest more of that truth rather than the errors. In the same way, it works with the denials that we work with in Unity. Some people don't like that term denial, and I understand because it's been misunderstood in many ways. But a better term, I think, a more current term, is just a statement of release, releasing a particular energy or belief system. And we release those things that are no longer serving us, that don't really bear the kind of fruit that we want to draw into our experiences, like the fig tree. And so we had a wonderful example of this story of a denial, of saying this is no longer going to be something that feeds me or anyone else. Many of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Emoto. How many of you are familiar with Dr. Emoto's work? Amazing, amazing work about the power of words. For those of you not familiar, let me just briefly explain that he took water and put labels on the water containers of different words. Some were really what I would call catabolic words, which means life-depleting words like hate and anger and fear. And he'd put those on the containers. And he would put others, he would put words like love and peace and joy and light. And he would put actually characters that represent these different uplifting kind of energies. And then he would take the water and freeze it and look under the microscope. And when he looked under the microscope, that water that had the energy that was catabolic showed really very chaotic kind of patterns. But the ones that were more anabolic were absolutely beautiful, gorgeous, geometrical structures and shapes. And you can look up Dr. Emoto and the water. It just is, it's amazing to see it. There's a power in our words to shape and to form physical reality. So Don Miguel Ruiz has a powerful teaching about this. How many are familiar with this, the 4 agreements? This is amazing work. And the very first agreement is, well, let me back up a second. One of the things he says is that we actually have all been domesticated, is the term he used. We've all been domesticated. And how I would translate that is we've all been programmed. We've all been programmed to see and agree on certain things, to agree on seeing things in a certain way, to agree on believing certain things. And in some ways, it actually can be a benefit. It does help us in some ways to make things, in some ways, easier for us. But at the same time, it's also holding us into a limited way of life and a limited way of being. And one of the ways that we actually need to break free of our domestication is through the 4 agreements that he talks about. And the first one he talks about is being impeccable with our words. Now, sometimes people get a little triggered by that word impeccable. You know, oftentimes when you hear impeccable, that means, to many, perfect. And people have either a real strong connection with being perfect, or they have a real aversion to the idea of being perfect. But what he says is the word impeccable actually means to be without sin. And that still sometimes brings up a lot of charge for a lot of people because there's a lot of energy around the word sin. But one of the things we understand in unity that the word sin is really not about our real nature. The word sin simply means that we are not in alignment with our real nature. And that's what he describes, is that so being impeccable means to be in alignment with who we truly are. And when we sin, is that we are sin with our words, we are saying things that are not in alignment with the truth of who and what we are. And so we get into things like, we say things like I'm sick, or I'm poor, or I don't have. Did you ever thought of that being a sin? To say things like, I don't have? I think a big sin we oftentimes say is, I don't have enough, or there's not enough. Those are not the truth of our nature and our being. The truth of our nature and our being is that of the divine, and the divine is abundant. And so if we're holding thoughts and ideas and words and saying words like that, we're actually going to create experiences that reflect that. We're going to create experiences that validate that. If we say there's not enough of this or there's not enough of that, we're actually what he calls, and let's say we're saying words about someone in our life or even about ourselves. He calls using these words as curses. And he describes them as black magic. Black magic. Black magic is really putting any kind of word out there that you don't want to really show up more of. If we don't want something more to show up in our experiences in our lives, don't use words that reflect that or project that. I thought it was kind of interesting this morning. I was looking at our bulletin. Look at the bottom of your bulletin. There's a little asterisk at the bottom. It says, the words are projected. Got a kick out of that. Our words are projected. In fact, you might say they are projectiles. And we oftentimes are using these projectiles, and we can use them to project life and health and wholeness, or we can use them to project hurt and harm, destruction, yes, and I believe even death. And so I think it's really a part of our spiritual work to really tune into and meditate on and reflect on how we are using the words for ourselves and for others. This is just a powerful work. One of the things he says, gives an example, is that there was a man many years ago that came to power who was able to mobilize an entire country to do horrific things by the power of his words, by the power of his speaking. And so I'm also aware that there have been amazing, amazing teachers who've been able to heal just by the speaking a word of peace, of love, of health and wholeness, of compassion. You and I actually have those same powers within us. Do you realize that? We have within us the power to mobilize forces and energies that are beyond perhaps even our comprehension or our awareness. And we have the power to make a choice about those. We can create a great shortage of toilet paper in the country, or we can actually help uplift those people in our lives and world. The 4 agreements are very powerful, and the first one he says, the first agreement is the most important one and also the most difficult to honor. It is so important that with just this first agreement, you'll be able to transcend the level of existence I call heaven on earth. The first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. It sounds very simple, but it is very, very powerful. Why your word? Your word is the power that you have to create. Your word is the gift that comes directly from God. The Gospel of John in the Bible, speaking of the creation of the universe, says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And through the Word, you express your creative power. It is through the Word that you manifest everything. Regardless of what language you speak, your intent manifests through your word. So what you dream, what you feel, what you really are, will all be manifested through the word. The word is not just a sound or a written symbol. The word is a force. It is the power you have to express and communicate, to think, and thereby to create the events in your life. You speak. Animals do not. It's an amazing gift that we have. Now let us see what the word impeccable really means. It means sin, as I said. And sin really means to miss the mark. I've talked this before. Sin is actually an archery term. And when you shoot an arrow at a target and you miss the bullseye, you don't even have to miss the target, but if you even miss the bullseye, it's called a sin. And it's a corrective term. It's to help us correct our aim. And so when someone shoots an arrow at a target and they're a little bit to the right of the bullseye, that means you've sinned right. And if you're to the left of the bullseye, that means you've sinned left. And the bullseye really is the truth of our nature. And so part of our unfolding is to really practice archery in life, to practice aiming for the target of the truth of our nature. And yes, I'm going to suggest to you there's no one probably in this world today that always hits the target. We don't always hit the target of our true being, of our true nature. But that is why we practice, isn't it? It's called a spiritual practice. Archery is actually a spiritual practice, interestingly enough. It's a very meditative practice if you've ever practiced shooting a bow at a target. It's just can be very reflective. So we are being called to come up a little higher. We're being called to speak from a place of our true nature and our being, to pay attention to the words that we use. One of the things that Don Miguel Ruiz says is that one of the biggest and most challenging forms of black magic is what we call gossip. Gossip basically is talking about anyone maybe I should just leave it about that. It's talking about anyone with words that we don't necessarily want to come back to us. See, there's a law in the creative process. And that law is what you put out comes back to you. There's some words that Louise Hay, I love the work of Louise Hay, and one of the things she says is one of the most, this is one of the most damaging words in the English language, and that's the word should. How often do we should on ourselves or others? And the reason she says this is because when you say the word should, you have automatically made you, yourself, or someone else wrong. And in that very saying of that, you are keeping yourself stuck in a condition and energy of wrongness. And so the word should needs to be eliminated from the English language. I was tempted to say we really should get rid of it. But then I'm misusing that word again myself. But there are other words that we don't really pay attention to sometimes. Sometimes we say words that we think are expressing something positive, but oftentimes they're actually expressing something that are not so positive. A word that sometimes is really challenging is the word hope. I really hope I get better. I really hope, but what we're really expressing in many ways is, but I'm afraid I won't. And so it's tricky sometimes. So what I'm going to invite you to do is really look at some of these things. Look at some of these words and ask, what is this really saying, or what am I really saying with the words? What am I saying with my words that maybe I'm thinking something other than that? It's a trap. We've kind of bought into it in this culture in many ways. Well, I hope. And what we're really saying is, I doubt. Is it true? Yeah. So I'm going to invite you to really reflect on that this week. This is our homework for the week, I believe, is to really reflect on, and probably the rest of our lives, words. In my meditation I got that words are the focusing mechanism of our creative power and thought. And if we don't want something to continue in our lives, we need to stop feeding it. We need to stop putting our words into it. Stop putting our words behind it. And we need to start putting our words into what we truly want to see and experience in our lives. This morning we did a couple of affirmations, and a few weeks back I passed out these cards. Let me see, are they still up here? They have the affirmations on them. And what I encourage you to do is, if you don't have one of these, I'll have the ushers or someone to pass these out for anybody that really would like to have one of those. Don't just stick it in a drawer somewhere. These are words that have great power. They have power to bring forth a great shift in energy in consciousness. There's one for yourself to really be a part of a healing energy for yourself, a prospering energy for yourself. And there's also one for this spiritual center to hold that energy in our words as well as in our thinking. And we know that the power of thinking and the power of our words can make a difference. So I invite you after the service, or if you'd like to, let me raise your hand if you'd like to have one of these, and we'll let there we go. You're welcome. Whoops. Thank you. Yes, would you? Thank you. Anyone else need one? Put it somewhere where you can see it, and then in the morning, speak these words. Not just think them, but speak these words out loud. And you'll be amazed at how, as you begin to do that, your feelings begin to align behind it, and it really does begin to reflect more of the truth of our nature. And that's our lesson for the week. Let's move into our meditation. Just breathe in and out. And let your thoughts, your heart, and in your mind, your words, be words and thoughts of yes. Yes. Saying yes to life. Saying yes to wholeness. Saying yes to peace. Saying yes to your divine nature. Saying yes to joy. Giving consent to that which is fruitful and uplifting and worthwhile for yourself and for others, those in your life and world, those that you've not perhaps even met. Saying yes to the divine good. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Breathing into that willingness to have our words express the power of our creative nature to create even more good in our world, in our life. Yes. Yes, Lord. Yes. Take a nice deep breath. Breathing in the heart space and just feel that energy of the words of yes. And know that a great power is at work. And so it is. Take another nice deep breath. And when you're ready, gently open your heart and your eyes. Look around and just think the words yes. And let's say together, yes. So it is.